Good evening, welcome. How y'all doing?
I'm gonna try to get some extra seats.
Great, great. Well, thanks for coming out. My name is Regester. I work with the Semester in Detroit program, if that isn't obvious. I sweatshirt. It gets funnier, don't worry. We want to welcome everybody here to Detroiters Speak, and you can see behind you, hopefully you got to see on your way in, the half sheets and posters for the winter 2019 Detroiters Speak edition. And later, you're going to learn about all the various people who are part of putting this series together. To begin, however, I want to welcome a dear friend of mine and colleague, who's standing over here to my right, Diana Copeland. And I'm just going to say a few words about her, and then Diana's going to welcome our special guest, who will start us off this evening for the series. Is that buzzing noise too loud? Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Okay, thank you. So Diana Copeland has done many, many things in her life already. And I got to know her a little bit back in 2010 when she was a part of organizing, one of the main people among many, to organize the U.S. Social Forum here in Detroit. And so if you're not sure what that is, look up U.S. Social Forum or World Social Forum at some point to get a sense of these incredibly important gatherings of activists and organizers around the world. And that's when I met Diana back in 2010, and I was immediately impressed by her in a whole number of different ways. Diana has done many things, I'll just say a few. She's been the director of the East Michigan Environmental Action Coalition, which is based here, which we'll hear more about in a little bit. She's a teacher. She's an educator in many different ways. She teaches for the U of M Semester in Detroit program, the School of Social Work at U of M, as well as Mary Grove College and their Social Justice program. And pursuing her PhD, I had to write this down because there's several parts to it, in community sustainability, climate justice, gender, and indigenous studies. Please welcome my really good friend and colleague, Diana Copeland.
Hello everyone, it's good to see you, and as Craig mentioned, my name is Diana, but I'm really just here to introduce someone that is a complete inspiration to me, someone that I'm always crazy happy to see or to be with whenever our paths cross. Every time I talk to her, I learn so much and always feel grounded whenever I have a conversation with her. So I'm very happy to introduce Sharon George. She's from the Haudenosaunee, and she is a wife of 38 years. She has 3 adult children, 2 daughters, and a son, and she's also the proud grandmother of 8. Sharon carries the women's pipe and medicine bundle to help with spiritual healing of women. She was born in Canada and moved to Detroit at a young age, where she continued to live and complete her education. She also obtained her degree in social work and substance abuse. And I believe she actually grew up in the Cass corridor, so she has a very unique perspective of what it means to be in this space today. She's always been passionate about working for Indigenous people. And for several years, she worked in Detroit, Toronto, London, Windsor, Ontario, always advocating for her people. Recently, she returned to Windsor, Ontario, where she works for the Legal Assistance of Windsor as the Indigenous Justice Coordinator. She is responsible for assisting Indigenous individuals and families with legal and social justice issues. Some of the issues she focuses on are the missing, murdered Indigenous women, racism, and policing. Previous to this, she worked in London as a child advocate, assisting Indigenous families to get their children back in the care after being taken from the Children's Aid Society. While in Detroit, she served as the executive director of the North American Indian Center, and she has worked as director for other agencies, as well as worked as a child educator, and has served as an advocate in the courts and jails. I first got to know Sharon actually during the United States Social Forum as well. This is a very special time for many of us, obviously. And during the U.S. Social Forum, she actually brought together a number of Indigenous communities from across Turtle Island and wove Indigenous issues and concerns and voice through the programming, through the all the the cultural events, through the opening and the closing ceremonies of the social forum. And she just did such an incredible job of bringing that voice to such an important event in Detroit. And she also led the pretty significant march that happened here against the incinerator. Her words and prayers launched that march of several thousand people. And then actually, that during that march, that shut the incinerator down for a year. So it was incredibly impactful, and I feel a lot of it had to do with Sharon's hard work and her voice. So without any further ado, I'm so honored to introduce Sharon George.
Good evening. They asked me if I wanted to use the microphone. I will this time, but usually my voice is loud enough that I can fill this room without any problem of people hearing me. So, that's just a little bit about me, and so I'm really honored to be introduced by such an incredible woman, Diane, and to be invited to come here. I'm so honored because every time you're asked to do something, it's such an incredible honor to be able to stand in front of people and share a little bit about yourself and about your beliefs and about indigenous people. And so I look around the room and see all the beautiful faces that are here, young and old. That's so incredible. And even our little voice over here. With our people, we love to have our little ones around because, they bring that balance. They bring that reminder to us, that they come with that specialness. And sometimes as parents we're like, shh, something's happening. And they listen so well. And if only we could hear as well as they could. Even when they're busy, they're still listening and they're still paying attention and learning. And so, as we grow older, our capacity to have that much energy and to have that much goodness still in our heart that those little ones have, is such a blessing. So thank you for bringing your little one here. I've been asked to come tonight and do an opening and give a few words about this area, this area of Detroit, and talk about the peoples that were here originally. And so in this area, indigenous people lived, and this was their community before all of these buildings. And one of the things with the indigenous people is they always lived by water. They always, they were very smart people. We knew where food was plentiful, and we knew when it got cold, it's quite difficult to live on that water edge. So, we were able to move inland, and where it wasn't so cold, and we knew how to perform. We knew how to sustain food and water and light and goodness. So in my opening, I just want to give that acknowledgement. So when I talk, we say that we talk to the Creator, the one that has created all, that has not only created life for us, but has created every piece of life outside. And so that's what we give thanks for. So that's what I'm going to be giving my words to. And we call it the natural law. So I'm going to say a few words about that natural law, and then I'll turn it back over. So Creator, we ask you to join us this evening as our hearts and minds come together as one. We give thanks for all of the goodness that you have given us. We give thanks to the grandmother of the moon that shines down on us as she continues her responsibility. She continues her responsibility as she goes through each calendar month. As she goes through that change, she reminds us women of our responsibility and each day that we go through and our own life cycle that we're able to bring life into the world. We give thanks to the brother of the sun that shines down on us and brings us that heat and that light. We give thanks because, again, he continues on with his responsibilities and acknowledges us with that warmth and that light every day. We give thanks to the water beings, for those water beings continue to flow. Those water beings continue to fill our body and nourish us as we need that water to sustain our life. We give thanks to all of those animals that walk about, those animals that have given their life to sustain our life. We give thanks to them. We give thanks to all of those little ones that you're not even able to see that walk about, that help life sustain this earth. We give thanks to Mother Earth for holding us, for embracing us, for allowing us to continue our journey as we walk along. And we think of her each day as we go through our life. We are able to sustain our life on Mother Earth because of all of the things that she is doing and all of the things that she is responsible for. We give thanks to all of the creation, all of those birds, those winged ones that fly out, those eagles that fly very high and look down on us and help protect us and remind us of dangers and goodness that we're able to face. We give thanks to all of those animals and those creatures that we see. We give thanks to those trees, that life that's out there, all of that, those flowers, those plants, those medicines that are still growing out there, that we still are using today to help keep us well. We give thanks to all of those things. As we look at all of the beings that are created out there, we think about them because without their life, there wouldn't be our life. So we give thanks to you, Creator, for providing us with that goodness as we come together. And so when we talk about that, we bring our minds together as one. That's a very difficult thing to do. Because if you think about that saying, bring our minds together as one, that means that every one of us have come here tonight for the sole purpose of learning, of sharing, of being here and sharing this space. So we're very thankful for each one of you that tonight you have given your time and you have given your ears and your heart and your voice to be able to be here tonight. So we give thanks. So we give that goodness of reminding each other of our caring and our goodness that we carry. So in that way, Creator, we say, Yamago, thank you.
Thank you again, Sharon and Diana, for helping to ground us in what will be an 8-week, not to bump into anybody, 8-week series exploring lots of very intense, dynamic challenges in the world and in the city. So thank you again, Sharon, for starting us off. I'd like to also introduce another person to help give you a sense of the space that we're in here in this building. Raise your hand if this is your first time in the Cass Corridor Commons. Raise it nice and high. So, okay, so I'd say 2 out of 3 or so. So we want you to have a sense of not just our groundedness in this land and where we are, but also in this building and what this space is. And so to do that, I'd love to invite my friend Darryl Jordan, who will speak for a few minutes to say hello to Darryl. Give him a round of applause. Darryl is the co-director for the East Michigan Environmental Action Coalition, as well as one of the main people among several in this building. I don't know if Ed's in the room, but if Ed's in the room, he's probably in the office. There's a small team, Ed, Dee, and Darryl, who really put a lot of work into keeping this space available to the community in a whole bunch of different ways. I'm going to let Darryl say some more, but we're really thankful for your work, Darryl. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? I'm really glad that you came out today because usually, you know, when bad weather comes, people stay home for the good stuff that they ought to be going to. You know, so I'm glad that it didn't deter you all. Now I'm putting on my glasses. Craig told me I had about 5 minutes to talk to folks. And for those of you who know me, 5 minutes go quick. So I wrote myself some notes. First thing I want to say, welcome to Cass Corridor Commons, home of EMEAC, East Michigan Environmental Action Council, Semester in Detroit, Sugarloaf Center, Detroit Independent Freedom School Movement, Black Lives Matter, First Unitarian Universalist Church, and others. We are meeting spaces for Detroit People's Water Board and many others. We say this is the people's space. This is your place. This is sacred ground. This is a church home for Viola Liuzzo, who became a martyr to the cause of civil and human rights, being killed transporting SNCC volunteers after the Selma March. This was one of the few churches, white churches, that sending money down south wasn't enough for participating in the civil rights movement. And so there were some sisters, some women. I know y'all men like to think, we men like to think we carrying stuff. But it was the women, like always, it was the women that decided to organize themselves into small groups and actually go down there and be down there and do things that would be helpful. I'm not talking about the men yet. This has also been the home to many organizations and progressive movement programs, including the Detroit Summer, 5E Gallery, and many others. Now, this corridor commons, why we call it the people's space, because gentrification in this city has pretty much taken out everything in this area. You know, now they call it Midtown. But this is a new thing. This ain't Midtown, this Cass Corridor Commons. They changed the name because they want it to be something new. This is about displacing black people, poor people, Latinos, and indigenous folks. They don't want us here no more. This is a brand new Detroit. This is Motown. But when you go down to the casino to see the Motown show, ain't no black people. What's up with that? You know, Detroit has a huge history. And I'm not just going to talk trash real quick. I'm going to tell you something really quick. That there's a war on Detroit, and if you didn't know it, I'm going to just give you some things and you can follow up. You don't have to take my word for it. So they're poisoning us over here with an incinerator on the other side of 5 hospitals and 2 cancer clinics. Downtown, nothing. They're not saying nothing about it. You know, there's lots of seniors and little kids whose asthma and respiratory sicknesses and illnesses get messed with every day. Now, some of you that probably read an article in the newspaper not too long ago where the developers are concerned. Yep, they're concerned about Midtown because that stink that comes from the incinerator is making it hard for them to sell the buildings they've been redeveloping. I know some people are probably tore up about that. I'm not. The other thing is in water. Can you believe that Detroit has the highest level of hepatitis A in the country? And it's because of the water. And it's because they shutting off the water because those greedy folks downtown, those corporations, and our sellout politicians who like that corporate money, they don't have a problem with trying to cut off enough people's water in Detroit so that we force a situation so that the water company becomes a private corporation. Can you understand that? You know, Now, it'd be different if they were selling hoagies. We get a choice. But water, we don't get a choice. Everybody got to drink water, you know? Shouldn't be privatized and they sell it like that. And then, God forbid, over here, on the southern part of the city, we got Marathon. And for people that didn't know nothing about Marathon, in the last week, I bet you heard about Marathon. So Marathon put all this stuff all in the air, and they said, don't worry about it, because won't nothing poison. You'll be all right, it just smells bad. But people have been calling their elected officials and calling other folks since that Saturday. People were at their homes throwing up and having all kinds of reactions to what went on. But that's okay, because we want jobs here in this city. And some folks, the politicians and stuff, act like they could care less about the health and well-being of the people that live here, as long as we get some jobs. And the jobs that they want to get here, it's not about making us happy and creating futures for us. It's about making those corporations real happy and stuff. How many tax breaks we done gave these thieving corporations in Detroit? All right, I said enough. Let me say, I had enough of this stuff. I hope that y'all, like me, take advantage of the whole 8 weeks of this program. It becomes a good time to not only hear about history and stuff, but to engage with folks. Because it's time for us to do something. We can't just keep sitting back being intellectual activists and organizers and folks that are concerned. It's time for us to get up off our ass. It's time for us to rise up. You know, here's what I always say. Rise up, fuck this shit. You know, we got people dying and hurting. You know, so it's time to do. So thank you for coming in Detroit, and thank y'all for coming. Oh yeah, one more thing. This is your home too. And so if you see some trash or some paper on the floor, you act like you're home unless you don't pick it up at home. But if you pick it up at home, we want you to act like this is your home and treat the space just like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. I'm sure Darryl will be back over the next 2 months. I just want to say a few words about Detroiters Speak, just so you have a sense of the kind of classroom that you just walked into tonight. Raise your hand if you've been a part of a previous Detroiters Speak class in the last 6 years. Raise them pretty high. So most of you haven't. All right, so maybe 20, 25. I'm going to say a couple things about what we're trying to do here over the next 8 weeks and kind of our pedagogy. And then we're going to bring up 3 of our 4 community partners for this semester to talk a little bit about their organizations and how they're going to be a part of this series over the next 8 weeks as well. I forgot to mention that after we've done our sort of extended introduction, so you have a sense of all the various pieces, Sharon is going to come back, and so is Diana, and they're going to talk more about our theme for tonight. So that's on the horizon. So Detroiters Speak has been going on now for 6 years, and the U of M Semester in Detroit program kind of got it off the ground. It's not an original idea. I'm sure it's happened in other places that have a speaker series. What we tried to do from the beginning is have these be public events, and to make sure anybody can come in. And being here in the Commons is a really critical part of that, as you can imagine, as Darryl just described, as this is a space that's identified and seen as a common space. And so coming here and being here makes a lot of sense. 4 years ago, we joined forces, so to speak, with the Detroit Equity Action Lab and the Wayne State University Damon Keith Center for Civil Rights. And you're going to hear more about some folks here tonight that are part of those important organizations. This is our 4th semester doing work together, and there's a couple things just to keep in mind. As I mentioned, it's a public classroom, and one of the things about that is attracting more people. We do have more chairs, and we'll bring them next week. One of the reasons why we don't have enough chairs tonight is there's a legal observer training happening, sponsored by the National Lawyers Guild over here in the parlor room, and they have about 30 or 40 seats. They're using them well. Next week, we're going to have those seats in here, so we want you to bring more people. If we have to move in the church, in the sanctuary, to put 200 or 300 people, we will. There's posters back there and little half sheets. Take some on your way out. We call this Detroiters Speak for a very intentional reason. You don't have to be a Detroiter to speak, but if you are a Detroiter, especially a longtime Detroiter, we want to center your voices and perspectives and experiences, whether you're out there in the audience or whether you're up front on a panel. And so that's where the whole notion of Detroiters Speak comes from. So whoever's in the room, we want everybody to feel comfortable joining in, but just be mindful that that's a very intentional part of our pedagogy, is to center the voices and experiences of Detroit. Lastly, I'll say this is an intergenerational classroom, and so depending on the week, you'll see various people here, some older, some younger, but we're always trying to be mindful that we're all learning from each other and that we're all the experts of our own experience, whatever our age and wherever we're coming from. So thank you all. That's a general, real quick sketch of the pedagogy of Detroiters Speak. Let me bring up the first of 3 of our community partners, and I'm looking at Ravina from the Detroit Justice Center, who is going to talk a little bit about what they do, and in the future they'll come back and be speaking at some of our sessions. Thank you. So let's welcome Ravina.
Thank you, and thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Darryl, and thank you, Diana, and thank you, Craig. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to be very brief, just because you will, if you come, you will meet more of our fabulous staff and our amazing director, Amanda Alexander, who founded the Detroit Justice Center on the concept of justice, but that justice doesn't start in cages. The justice system that puts people in cages and imprisons citizens is not a real justice system. And a justice system that puts people in cages because they cannot afford to bond themselves out is not a just system. So with her spirit and her passion and many, many years of hard work, the Detroit Justice Center was born. Right now, it's still a new organization, but there are 3 major components. And it's based on the concept of movement lawyering. Movement lawyering doesn't mean you have to have a law degree. It's about advocacy and seeking change in the system through legal means. I'm for civil disobedience, but being an attorney, I know how to go into court and argue some things. But we're also looking at systemic change. Probably many of you are familiar with the Bail Project, which is in partnership with our organization. The Bail Project actually started in Brooklyn, but we are fortunate to have a partner with them in Detroit. And they are addressing the problem of people being incarcerated prior to adjudication. People who are presumed innocent, who are kept in jail because they cannot afford the bond. So the Bail Project assists those individuals. The project can only help up to $500 per individual, but that helps a tremendous amount of people. Amanda heard stories from many people when she was a clinical professor at U of M who lost jobs, lost their children because they couldn't afford bail. And these are not high-level criminals. These are people who have misdemeanor charges or low-level felonies. A bond is just, I'm going to come to court the next time. It really is ridiculous. Anyway, go on. But it evolved from that to include legal services. I'm part of legal services practice. We're focused on helping people who are chronically poor, but mostly returning citizens. What I was so excited about with the Detroit Justice Center is this is a legal service that is providing aid to a population that has been really disenfranchised. Both once they were in prison and incarcerated, all of their life went to crap. And nobody was looking out for them until a number of organizations that have partnered with us, including, is to their legal issues, helping them get housing, helping them get jobs. And we do partner with those organizations and help their clients with their outstanding legal issues. There's also our community legal workers. Like I said, you don't need a JD. Our community legal workers are people who are specifically trained to fight legal issues. Their focus right now is helping poor residents fight their tax assessments so their property taxes can be lowered. So we're in the cycle of doing that right now. And then Amanda is, because she's a professor, is going to create this research piece through the Just Cities Lab, which will bring together important data about how government spending on justice system doesn't really create justice. What are the ways we could spend taxpayer dollars on education, on healthcare, on community development that really it creates a just city. So some of you may know, and some people have told me that they know about the lawsuit. We sued the county for the jails, the jail project that they're trying to create. The lawsuit, there's no news on it now, but the legal issue is very nuanced. It's about the improper procedure and proceeding with the bond proposal, but the spirit of it is no new jails. We don't need $500 million in Wayne County spent on a 2,100 bed jail complex. $500 million in Wayne County could be spent far better in this community. So thank you for letting me speak. It's lovely to join all of you. I'm looking forward to meeting everybody in June.
Thank you, Regina. I'd like to invite Yumisi from the Black Youth Project 100 organization and have her talk a little bit about your involvement in this series as well. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Yumisi Obetiyambo, and I'm the Healing and Safety Chair for Black Youth Project 100 Detroit. What Black Youth Project Detroit is, we are a membership organization for Black people ages 18 to 35 who fight for Black liberation through a Black queer feminist lens. And what that means is we center the most marginalized of the marginalized. So we center Black queer people, we center Black non-gender conforming people, we center Black trans people in our movement work. Currently, Black Youth Project 100 Detroit is working on a campaign called Green Lights Black Futures. And it is a campaign against Project Green Light. Who's seen these green lights flashing around everywhere in Detroit? What that means is there's a camera there and it's watching you. And so what the Detroit Police Department would like you to believe is that these green lights, this surveillance is keeping us safer. Oh, the police will come quicker and you'll be safe. But really it's not. It has not been proven to be effective at all. And it's really placing more people in jail. So when you think about they're building this new jail in conjunction with having these surveillance cameras everywhere in the city, it all goes together. They're currently spending over $9 million on this project. Imagine what things can be done with our community, for our community with $9 million, in addition to that $500 million that they're spending on the jail. What would you do in your community? What would you do in this community? Definitely not hyper-surveil people and put them in jail. So we're fighting against this Project Greenlight, and we're also reimagining what community safety looks like. It's definitely not the police, and it's definitely not prisons. So we'll be leading the class about surveillance, and we'll be collaborating for the last class about reimagining what community safety looks like, and the February 28th one about policing identities. If you have any questions about Black Youth Project 100 Detroit or the national organization as a whole, you can feel free to come talk to me or shop.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to now welcome Alea Harvey Quinn from Forest Detroit, who's going to talk a little bit about Forest Detroit, which is a newer organization here in the city. Thank you, Alea.
What's up, everybody? Forest Detroit was founded in 2017. I was hired to work with a congregation organizing group and to do a bunch of one-on-ones in Detroit and give them a recommendation for what should be done. And I basically said, we need an organization that centers directly impacted populations and young people. And I said that there's no like real robust effort that centers the leadership and organizing of returning citizens, of young people. Like, there isn't like a huge organizing effort that's doing that. So Force is attempting to stand in that space in partnership with some of the people in this room. Harvey. Okay. Pardon my child, y'all. So Force works in 4 areas. We do participatory research. Our goal is to center Detroiters as the experts of their own lived experience, right? And so we surveyed 610 Detroiters around sentiments of safety. He's a Leo moon. Kari. Okay. So we surveyed 610 Detroiters about their sentiments around safety. What are the connections between poverty and violence? What are your sentiments around gun legislation? And we got some really interesting results. Like, we got some people that felt more comfortable in their neighborhoods than they felt in their own home. We had some young people in one of the most violent neighborhoods in America that felt safer than the adults in the safest neighborhoods. We just had a number of interesting results. Among them were the causes of violence that were striking, right? And because we don't have an unlimited budget, this is what we published. We published that there was a stark contrast around how people perceive the cause of violence, the number one cause of violence. So young people 17 and under reported in our survey that the number one cause of violence was drugs. Hey, don't take nobody's pizza. Don't give y'all food up to him. So they said that the number one cause was drugs and alcohol. And then immediately, like 18 to 35, which was 2 different survey groups, those constituents said that poverty was the number one cause of violence, which aligns with the Annie E. Casey Foundation survey that says that 1 in 3 Detroiters that age is neither working nor in jail. And then as soon as you turn 36, and all of the other ages said, you need to be able to de-escalate. We need to be able to talk through conflict. So it was fascinating, almost as if Kari, don't please, eat your food, don't step in your food. So I'm gonna sit down. My organization does participatory research. We take that research and then we do narrative building, right? So our narrative is that the criminalization of Detroit that Detroiters are experiencing is both structured and forced, right? Like, if there are 4 ways out of poverty, like, let's say that you could get a really great education and invent something, or get enough knowledge to build your way out of poverty, right? Well, we gutted Detroit schools. Judge Stephen Henderson III, 2 years ago, declared that young people in Michigan don't have the right to literacy after 12 years of education. So that's one route, right? We know Detroit, the Metro Detroit area is one of the most divided, segregated cities in our nation, right? Well, another way out of poverty is through mentorship, or through marriage, or through making a social arrangement with somebody in an upper class, right? Like, you could marry up, you could get a mentor and be coached up. There are all of these things. Detroiters don't have access to that, right? There is a third route out of poverty, and that is high-paid, low-skilled labor. Those jobs have been gutted, right? We know that those jobs aren't accessible in our city. There is a 4th route out of poverty that we don't want to talk about. That's crime, y'all. That's what Detroiters are left to. And so that's what our narrative building work is about. The 4th bucket of work that we do is direct organizing. Like I said, we do organizing with millennials, returning citizens, and other directly impacted populations. Young people. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we're going to just do a couple more introductions, and if I could invite the planning team to come up front real quick. We're just going to each take a minute to say a thing or two. As you can already appreciate, I hope, is that the community organizations that we've heard from are going to be a really important part of this series. And in fact, many of them will be coming back to speak with us on various panels. There's a few of us who've been sort of on this planning team that put this together and are going to be serving mostly as facilitators, and much better facilitators than me, I'm sure, in the future. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And I think I'm going to start with David, just because David's also going to tell you about the fourth community partner tonight that will be joining us in the future.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Goldberg with the Department of African American Studies at Wayne State University. My class here. You all got to raise your hands. Get your love. All right. Thank you for coming. I did want to speak a little bit about our fourth community partner, and that is the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality, a long-standing organization within the city, founded by a gentleman who's no longer with us, Ron Scott. I just want to bring up his name and shed some light on his work. And we'll talk a little bit about that more next week, as a representative from the organization will be here to talk about their history. The group was formed in the wake of the murder of Nellis Green in the 90s, and was largely responsible for bringing the Detroit Police Department under a consent decree. So you'll get to know them a little bit more next week. Next, we'll go to Peter Hammer.
Good evening, and I'll say a few more things in a minute, but I teach at Wayne State Law School. I direct the Damon J. Key Center for Civil Rights. And it's really a privilege to be partnering and trying to connect with our community partners in general. So I'm really happy to have them here today. And we've got some other folks. We've got Marion coming in quickly. All right, we've got Darryl, all right? All part of the team. I want you to see everybody that is working to make this possible. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Marion Van Dam. I'm a program coordinator for semester in Detroit. I'm an East Side Detroiter, currently living in Southwest Detroit.
Sorry.
Hello, I'm Darryl Goodwin. I am the event and community engagement coordinator.
Hey everyone, my name is Peter Blackmer. I'm actually for detail back there, but I'm a research fellow with the Detroit Equity Action at the Damon J. Key Center for Civil Rights at Wayne State Law.
All right, thank you, planning team. So two things. One, they're going to be helping facilitate future sessions, but also as we move forward, if you see any of these folks and you have suggestions, comments, questions, concerns, future needs that we might want to consider, please look for one of us over the next several weeks, okay? I'm going to turn it over to Peter Hammer, who's going to give us a little bit of a description of where we're headed, and then we're going to bring Sharon and Diana back up. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. I almost feel like I'm not in Detroit. All right, good evening. All right, there we go. A lot of energy goes into this, and to me this is one of the most exciting things we do, so I hope you sort of feel special. And I think you're going to see something really interesting in the 8 sessions. One thing you realize is you're not sitting in rows, right? We're sort of breaking that linearity. We're sitting in circles. And we're going to have discussion, right? So we're going to have a small group activity this week, but typically you'll have presentations and you'll have discussion. And we try to split 50-50 on the time to make sure that the discussion is an important part of what's learning. And then we all become teachers and learners and learn from each other. So how many people saw the poster, right? Saw the poster? How many actually read the poster? Right? Read the poster, right? That gives you what I call the arc. And imagine you're sitting down there, I just want to deal with policing, right? And kind of go through that exercise. Well, what is policing? What do you want to talk about policing? And it's more than just the police car, right? And we're much deeper than that. We police people in this country in multiple ways. And if you kind of look at the title even, we're talking about whose safety. Is any of this making us safe yet? and we look at the policing minds, right? Because we're policing minds to control people as much as policing bodies. We're policing bodies, and we're policing boundaries. And we want to think about ways to interrelate all of those things and to get you to think much more broadly about how policing functions in our society, and take that home with you, right? But also take that creativity about how to play with an idea, how to create frames, how to see interrelationships, and ideally, as we go through this journey together, it's like a train ride, we'll go through these different stops, we're going to start thinking about what policing is, what social control is, in a different way. Tonight, we're trying to ground it in the indigenous spirit of where we're at locally, but it also is an important exercise, and I'm going to really look forward to what we hear next. Do fish know anything about water? Right? Well, they know some things with their experience, but we're so surrounded by it, and we don't have a good theory of water because we're surrounded by water. So sometimes what we have to do is go through exercise where we break the fishbowl, right? We're so surrounded by what the police institutions that we have, the jails that we have, that we normalize it, right? It's very hard for us to even imagine that we could have a society that does not look like the society that we have. And yet if we time travel back 500 years, 1,000 years in the very space that we're in, and we look at the indigenous culture, we also find out that they have very different understandings of what safety is, what is security, how to engage in conflict resolution. So we want to use tonight in some respects to break that fishbowl and to understand that there can be other ways we see safety and security and what causes safety and security. Next week or next session, we're going to talk about the history of race and policing in America. I would go so far as to say that there's been no more important force than police and criminal law in maintaining racial discrimination, racial segregation, racial oppression. Right? The two are intertwined like DNA, and we have to understand the history of that. We can talk about slave patrols during slavery. We can talk about slavery by another name, if people have read Paul Blackman's book, and how we use the criminal justice system as a way to regulate and supply labor as soon as we got rid of slavery. We have the use of stigma and criminalization as a means of policing the mind and social control. We have the whole notion of the new Jim Crow and the mass incarceration that we talk about. We have to understand the history about how criminal law has been used as a tool of racial discrimination and oppression. The third session takes us a little bit more contemporary and looks about policing Black Power. If you don't already know, Detroit was integral to the creation of the Black Power movement. Right? So you think about the Black Panther certainly, but the birth of the Republic of New Africa happened in Detroit. So we'll talk about Black Power, we'll talk about surveillance, right, and the undermining of the Black Power movement. And we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the New Bethel incident, right? So anybody hear of the New Bethel incident? Right? No hands go up, some hands, the gray hairs go up, right? The older folks know that. Amazing incident where the police surrounded C.L.R. Franklin's church, Aretha Franklin's father's church, where they were having the meeting of the Republic of New Africa, and rounded up and arrested everybody in there, right? After a wild shootout where amazingly nobody got killed, right? And then take them all to prison. This is 2 years after the riots. Anybody hear of Judge George Crockett? Right? You learn more about Judge Crockett. He went down there 5 in the morning on a Sunday and held court, right? And started releasing anybody that there was not probable cause to take. And the only thing in America that would not make the headline of Republic of New Africa killing 2 Detroit police officers was a black judge setting them free, right? And a huge backlash. So we're going to tell that story, and then we're going to go a little bit further as we go from the streets to the courts. Anybody hear of Ken Cockrell? Right, senior, right, not junior. And we're going to talk about how lawyering in that era and defending some of these people accused of crimes radically changed and reformed the criminal justice system here, although obviously not sufficient enough. Right? So we're going to tell that history. Fourth session will be policing identities, again coming up more closely. Anybody who is different is potentially a target. Right? Particularly if you look at the history in most recent Detroit, African American trans people are being policed, right, violently. Right? Other forms of identity. People are immigrants, right? People are undocumented. Muslim Americans, right? So we have this whole notion of trying to police and control identity, and we'll explore that as well. Fifth session, we're going to talk about the surveillance. We talk about Project Greenlight with Emisi. Who's watching us, right? Right now, right? Who's watching us when you go home? We'll look at surveillance, Project Greenlight. You can't go downtown now without an endless series of security cameras. We also have contestability in public-private spaces, where things that used to be public are being turned private, and those boundaries are being policed. Then we talk about the actual cost of mass incarceration in Detroit. I'm an economist as well as a lawyer, and I often say that if we don't deal with mass incarceration as an economic development issue, you're never going to have a comeback in Detroit's economy. It's devastating families, it's devastating neighborhoods, it's devastating the economy, and we want to sort of get real about what those actual costs are. We want to talk about the siting of the new jail and how that's really a development and economic issue as well as a mass incarceration issues. We want to talk about whose vision is really controlling the city. Section 7, the new abolition movement, right? If people grew up with slavery for hundreds of years, they don't see it as the evil it is. Right? We have grown up with mass incarceration. We don't see it as the evil it is. Right? And that's why, again, we have new frames of understanding and thinking. We have to start imagining radical change. Right? We have to really start envisioning what a world would look like in America if we had no jails. Right? What would a world look like? And mount a new abolition movement. Right? In the same way, at some point, people, black and white, were saying, we've got to abolish slavery. Right? We're going to look at the new abolition movement that is directed against mass incarceration. And we're going to end in session 8 with a visioning exercise. How can we imagine new notions of security? Right? What are the root causes of things that make us safe? What are the root causes of things that produce security? And how can we imagine a society and start thinking practically of moving there in ways that could actually change safety and security and move to a more just society? What I'm incredibly excited about is our community partners, because they're doing this work. Right? So we're going to bring in people in the city who are innovators and leaders nationwide, and they're taking that fight every day. So you're going to hear from people with the real expertise, and I'm incredibly excited about that. So Greg, Mike is back.
Okay, so we're going to let you stand, because I know you want to stand just for a minute. So please stand and take a minute to just kind of, in your place, stretch, move yourself around a little bit. We've thrown a lot at you for an introduction, so we're just giving you a little bit of a chance to breathe, and maybe I'll shut up. So this is sort of like a pretend break, not an actual break. We're going to bring back Sharon and Diana to speak with us for a few minutes, and then we're going to break into small groups, okay? And so I wanted to give most, unless you really need to go to the bathroom, please, you can stand a little bit more, but that was a pretend break, I'm sorry. But it was a little tiny break at least. So let's welcome Sharon and Diana back up to kind of talk a little bit more to tonight's theme. And then the other thing you'll notice is there's going to be little pieces of paper distributed over the next 10 minutes or so. They might start circulating around before we're over listening to Sharon and Diana, and we'll tell you where those colors mean you're supposed to go with the small groups. So you're going to get a chance to talk to each other and hear from each other as well. So I want to welcome back Diana Copeland.
Thanks, Craig, and thank you for that mini fake break. So my main purpose of coming back up here is, again, to just introduce Sharon George and also to speak to what an inspiration I find her, and continue my role as the president of the Sharon George Fan Club. When I think about public safety and Anishinaabe land, the land that we are on currently, the first word that really comes to mind for me is terrorism. And thinking about what does it mean to live in a state of being terrorized. And I think many of us, and many of the things that have been talked about by the community groups, speak to that. Like we're experiencing that now. So just thinking about, on this land, destabilizing communities, especially indigenous communities, and taking away what's central. So taking away children, removing them into boarding schools, settler adoptions, land possession and displacement, erasure through taking away spirituality, language, community structure, and anything that's familiar. And I see undoing this work, this decolonization of terrorism, as a big part of the work that Sharon George is doing now. By putting children back in their homes, by reevaluating the education system and looking at systems that actually work for communities of color and work for indigenous children. Naming the violence against indigenous people and naming what is happening with missing and murdered indigenous women. Colonization is not a historical event. We see this type of colonization, displacement, destabilization of water and resources, etc., removal of children as a continuous process, something that's happening now, something that we're seeing happening in Detroit currently. So this continuation of colonization can also be named as a new development and also be named as gentrification. So just with that, I'd like to pass it over to Sharon Chris George.
So, you are all amazing people, you know, the people that have spoke already and the knowledge that is in this room is miraculous. Because with all of this knowledge, with every single person in this room and the knowledge that you have the power to make change. Together, you have that power. And so one of the things with indigenous people, we learned that a long time ago, that we had to stick together because the more we stuck together, the more power that we had. Once we, started arguing with each other, and no, I don't want to listen to you, and I think you're right, and I think you're wrong. We have that in communities. We have that even in our own families. But when we can come together and acknowledge that fact that there is something wrong, there's something wrong with this system that we're in. And it hasn't started yesterday. It didn't start in my generation. And it sure didn't start in my mother or my grandfather's generation. And so just in those generations, I can look back and see how much problems that there were with what was happening that was put here by the government standards. The government who wanted control. The government who wanted everybody to look the same, act the same, dress the same, talk the same. And if you didn't do those things, you were so singled out. And so that was years and hundreds of years ago when my people were here. And so that's what built reservation life. That was what built genocide. That's what built them putting indigenous kids, taking them out of their homes and putting them in residential schools. All of those things that were happening was because we were a people of color, we looked different, we spoke different, we had our own ceremonies, our own customs, our own beliefs. That was wrong. And guess what? Today, it is exactly the same way. It is exactly the same way. Because they are still rounding up children by the hundreds. And I bet you every one of you know some child that has been taken by social services in the name of protection. And it's not about protection at all. It's about making sure that you're following their lead. It's about making sure that you're doing exactly what they want you to do, live how they want you to live, and be how they want you to be. And that is a whole controlled society. And so we have seen that over and over again. We've seen it with slavery. We've seen it with Jewish concentration camps. We've seen it with numbers of people that have come here, for a free country, right? And so we get so lost in those discussions about what that means to live in a free country. Well, you're going to learn if you keep your ears open. You're going to learn if you keep your eyes open. Because you have neighbors, because you have community, because you have people of the same interest as you. So we know with my people that right now, the epidemic that's going on with my people, particularly with women, is that there's murdered and missing women that is happening. And it's not only happening in Canada, it's happening throughout the United States. And so you know, we talk about trafficking. Well, trafficking is one area. So we have no idea what's happening with these murdered and missing women. We know many, many of them, and I can go on social media. Every day I go on there and just look, and I come across at least 10 women a day. And that's only what I've been looking at. 10 women a day that has been posted as missing. Except there are thousands of women. And this is just indigenous women. So what about your community? What about your family? What about the people that you know? That we're not living in a just society. We're not living where we can understand what people talk about, that freedom. We're losing people by the thousands. One of the things with indigenous people is because we are such a small group. We're such a small percentage of the people. Why? Because we have been killed off, we have been jailed, we have had so many different things happen to us where they haven't even told you about it. You know, they haven't told you about the stories of them being mass graves of little kids. They haven't told you about the mass shootings that they've done. And so we hear little bits and pieces on the news, you know, that somebody got killed today. You know, but how many of you have heard an indigenous person got murdered today? Probably not very many of you. Because that's something that's not talked about. Why? Because we're not highly visible. And I'm not saying that any one race of people is any higher than any other race, because we're not, you know. But with all you people learning about social justice, with you learning about policing, and with you learning about keeping your eyes open, learning a little bit more about the laws and what's happening in your own backyard. And you know, this 7-mile stretch here, you know, has been one of those changes. And so, you know, we've heard about the libraries, and we've heard about, you know, the changes that have been happening here in Detroit. You know, it's quite amazing. But we also heard about that, you know, 25 years ago. You know, remember when they were building up the malls? You know, they moved people out of those areas. When they built up the airports, they moved people out of those areas. You know, and so every time there's something where they say, hey, we got a little bit of money, let's put it over here. Let's take care of this. Because then we can take care of those people. And it's always about those people. You know, it's never named who we are, it's just those people. Because then it goes back to that same idea that I was talking about. How do we round you up? How do we take care of you? Well, you know, they have done a real good job of throwing people in jails. Indigenous people have the highest incarceration rate. And you may think, you know, that black people have the highest incarceration rate. Well, the difference here is that black people have a higher population than indigenous folks. So if you look at the population of indigenous people, men and women, we have the highest percentage of men and women incarcerated. We have the highest rate of health disparities. We have the highest rate of murdered and missing women. We have the highest rate of children being removed from homes. And so at some point in time, all of that, for us all, has to change. So I thank you for listening to me. I'm so excited about the class. I want to come back and just come across that river. You know, like Diane said, I grew up in this community when my family moved to Detroit. We lived right down the street here. And, you know, this whole area here, back in the day, was where indigenous people lived. You know, you always had your little hub of people, you know, where you find your family. And so when the families migrated here from other reservations, from other cities, this is where they came. And of course, it was all in the name of automotive industry, you know, how to find a job. And so many of our people, even back in those days, weren't eligible to get those jobs. Just like, you know, we're still finding that same thing out today in the name of poverty. So I thank you so much for listening to me. My heart goes out to your heart, and that we keep this movement strong. Have a go.
Okay, thank you again, Sharon and Diana. So this is where I need your cooperation, because we're still going to meet in our small groups. We're a little bit behind our schedule, but that's okay. We've done this before, and I know you don't think we can do it, but we can. So, does everybody have a piece of paper, first of all? If you don't have a piece of paper, I guess don't hold it up. So everybody has one? Great. Okay, so I have 5 facilitators, and we're going to break into 3 different places. If you are a blue group, Marion, back there, if you raise your hand, is your person. So once I say go, you'll go towards Marion. If you are a green group, Dave Goldberg, back there with a cool hat, is your person. The blue and the green groups are going to stay in this room, okay? You're going to have to reassemble your seats. Got that? Blue and green. If you are pink, I believe we have pink, right? Yes? If you're a pink group, you're going to be with me. Sorry. We're going to go into the child care room. Yes, that's where I go, the child care room. If you are a yellow, you're going to go in the sanctuary with Peter. If you are a, what do I have left? Red, is this red? Red, then you're going to go with the other Peter, also in the sanctuary. And you're going to find 2 different parts of it. And when I say go, you're going to quickly grab a piece of pizza if you want another one, and find your people. Go.
Orchard Lake, what security is, they're both going to say different things. Because they were taught different things and they've had different experiences with, you know, the police and all that stuff. So, thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for showing us out. We're going to go to the blue group. I'm going to ask if we can keep the chatter down in the room, just because it's hard to hear. If you need to talk, maybe go out in the hallway. The blue group, who wants to talk from the blue group? Is that you, Cass? Yay. Thank you.
Hi, Cassandra. So in our group, we talked a lot about kind of the theme today of just like with indigenous folks and kind of like at the same time the hyper-criminalization that we see in the media of Black people and how we're constantly seeing statistics of crime and violence and just like the invisibilization of indigenous murder and attacks. And then we kind of got launched into a larger conversation about how this is a trend that we see across the world, and that like pretty much at this point every corner of the world has been globalized and colonized, and the effect that it's had on indigenous communities, and how that like disease and genocide has wiped out so much of the population of indigenous folks, not just in the U.S. context of America, but of the Americas. And we also then kind of at the end just, learning about all these things and learning about these statistics, and like kind of this idea, this question that wasn't resolved, but like what do we do like after learning this? How can we move forward, and how can we kind of take action or do something to change when the powers that be are so strong and entrenched? I hope you can answer that as we go on.
Thank you, Cass. How about the yellow group? And pink is on deck, and then red, I believe. Yellow group.
We didn't designate. Does anybody want to volunteer on behalf of the yellow group?
Some brave person.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So pink is next. Savio, and there might have been one other person.
Hi. Oh, okay. I'm Tristan. I go to Wayne State. That's my professor. So in our group, we talked about like safety and like what we think about police, and then a lot of people had some general things about safety. Well, my representation of safety was my dad, because ever since he passed, I have a hard time with feeling a little safe even when I'm at home. And then we talked about police and what was our general thought of police, and it's a little different because that's the person, like, police is the image, like, we're supposed to go to them for anything if we feel unsafe, but then, like, those are the main people who make us feel unsafe at the same time. And I grew up in a household of police officers, my parents, my grandparents, everybody. So I know that every single cop isn't like how my family is, and so it's different because I've had good and bad experiences with cops. So I kind of feel half and half about police. And then it's always that worry about my brothers going out into the world, and if they get stopped by a cop, they might not come home, because unfortunately that's a scary reality for Black people, not just Black men. And that was basically kind of it what we talked about. To sum it up, basically. So.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So we have two more. The pink group, we have two people who are going to share their time. Savio, and then where did the other woman go back there? I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Can you come up here? Yeah. Okay, from the pink group. Okay, Savio, you're gonna say a few things.
So we mainly started by talking about words that mean to us safety. There were many different words. I said family because I feel. Oh, my name is Savio. Sorry. I'll probably heard my mom already in the back. Okay. So the word that I thought that meant safety to me was family, because I feel connected to them. Other words that we heard were interconnectedness, togetherness, a community. Although one person said whiteness, and it's interesting because we can view like safety as a privilege that not everyone has. And then our next question was sources of safety. And that also had very different, varied from what makes us feel safe and to how does someone become safe. Like, you could say knowledge is a source of safety, and how I want to know that I'm secure. Or that source of safety is resources, and that you are born either with better resources and better tools for survival, or you're not, and there's this huge disparity.
And on that knowledge point, we also talk about the opposite, which was ignorance. So if you don't know something is happening, you can create a false sense of safety within yourself. As far as the last question, it was, what can we learn from indigenous groups today or in the past that we can apply to our own communities? And one thing was conflict mediation. So they had to deal with a lot of conflict from outside people, and how do we resolve that? So within our own communities, we face conflict every day. How can we reform and find peace within ourselves and between other people in larger communities? Another one was environment. So indigenous people really value their environment, and society today doesn't seem to really care about it, but that's something we need to make a priority going forward, considering this is a place that we reside and we don't get another Earth. And I wrote that and I can't even read it this far. Imperialism, I kind of don't remember that point. I think you brought it up.
Yeah, like, imperialism might be too macrocosmic of a word, but it's like, we gotta be wary of like people trying to, like, we have to be wary of like, we don't want to have people like, even though it could be for our safety, we gotta be careful of who we ensure our trust to and not end up dominated, and sometimes you don't even get the choice.
Right. So yeah, that's it for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Dale. Okay, we have one, is it red, right? Red? Who's the red group volunteer? Yeah, thank you so much.
Hi everybody, my name is Toussaint. It's like croissant but with a T. So we talked about safety and words that we associate with safety. Some of those were familiarity, family, but some words have said that safety is temporary and that some people don't really have the choice to feel safe. And for some people, safety can come from being unsafe for moments of time. For example, doing criminal acts so that they can have the feeling of financial safety, even though they sometimes have to put their physical safety at risk. Safety can be viewed differently by many different types of people and how, but there was a connection that safety involved more than just yourself. Safety usually involves other people, having your community or your culture that you're around makes you feel more safe. And yeah, that's what we talked about.
We're allowing one quick comment to be added, then I'm going to ask David to give us a preview for next week.
Sorry, I was also in the red group. My name's Camila Nieva, and I just also wanted to point out that we also mentioned how safety can also be intrinsically tied with like dominant narratives and what narratives are perpetuated and put into like media that we see, what narratives are passed down within family and generations that kind of connect to like our personal idea or sense of safety.
So much. Okay. Thank you all for coming out tonight. David's going to give you a quick preview, 30 seconds or less, of next week, and please spread the word.
Next week, the theme is crime and police, space and policing and history. And we're going to have two speakers, one to deal with more contemporary issues from the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality, and local historian Jaman Jordan, who's going to talk about the history of that divide of, one safety oftentimes imperils another, looking at kind of the history of Detroit from colonization to the 20th century.
Thank you, David. So, 3 very quick things. First of all the readings for this whole series are on a website. And some of you are enrolled in classes, some of you are coming just as students of life. Semesterindetroit.com. Look for the Detroiters Speak tab, click on it, and you'll see the readings. Secondly, before you leave, make our friend Ed happy and fold chairs and put them up against the wall. And if they're green chairs, I think they stack. I'm not entirely sure. Thirdly, if you're taking the bus back to Ann Arbor, it's going to leave at 9:15. So you don't have a lot of time, but you have a little bit. And lastly, thank you so much for coming out, and we hope to see you next week.